Hey, Primatech peeps. Well, welcome back to the Primatech Files, a Southgate Media Group podcast dedicated to all things in the Heroes universe. I am Lilith, and joining me, as always, is my handsome co-host.
Yeah, that's me. It's Ricky. Handsome Ricky.
Pretty Ricky's what they call him. Up for discussion today is a pretty in-depth fanfic by the name of Godsend. It's written by Adam Sklar. It's a lot of chapters. Was not expecting that. Because fanfic, people usually stop at like 4 and never update again.
Yeah, it's definitely in-depth. And we've got links in the show notes to everything. He's got like, 2 versions that you can read. Well, not versions, but like 2 places you can read them at. He's got like a cast list of what he thinks they will look like and a trailer. So, yeah.
Yeah. So basically it's a fan-made spinoff that takes 1 year after the events of season 4.
I believe so, yes.
Yep. And it's based kind of on an original character, so.
Yeah. That's the thing. Well, with me personally, when I was fanficking or when I was like RPGing, I always really just preferred doing original characters. I always loved original characters. I always thought it got a bit murky when you got into adding in canon characters because, everyone's got their way of seeing them. And so it wasn't like it was a difficult read for me. It's just, like when you're reading Save the Cheerleader, Destroy the World, you're like, that wouldn't happen in my head, but I'll go with it.
Yeah, so it's set in England, by the way, guys. So this is
What?
kind of Ricky's. It's probably why Ricky wanted to do this. That's all the information you really need for right now. So.
Okay, let's go into this. I've got some pretty in-depth kind of breakdowns of like each chapters, and then I've got like some overall notes. So it starts off with what's called chapter 1, Rude Awakening. And we have one of our characters, we have our main protagonist finding himself at a place called Petrelli Manor. He has no power that he knows about, and there's an eclipse the next day, and he's taken in by the leader of the place called Frank. They talk about the incident, which is very Avengers-like, and people are at these kind of safe havens, the Petrelli Manors, obviously, and lots more people have appeared outside of this particular Petrelli Manor, not just him. And there's someone in there a bad guy called the Consumer, who kind of really doesn't play a part, but his power is to kind of paralyze and he just eats people's flesh, which is, I thought that was quite interesting because obviously we've had that kind of Sylar character, but here we have someone who literally is just a cannibal.
Well, Sylar was going to be a vampire.
Okay.
Originally, and NBC was Tim, buddy.
He was going for that whole Nosferatu thing, wasn't he? Yeah. Just all in black with a fedora type hat on, right?
Yes.
Very religious, yeah.
We should have that for Sylar.
We find out the guy's name is Riley, and he knows someone called Lily, and we realize that Frank is kind of not who he seems, and we get the first words Godsend device, which is plays a big part in the rest of the series. We find out Lily's
basically just a Maltese Falcon. I'm just
We find out Lily's power is she can control emotions and access kind of shared memories. They know each other. She makes him remember her, but there's kind of when he's remembering her, he doesn't really have a face. And she says, it's probably because you don't even know what your face looks like. But she can't do anything else. She can only like access shared memories. And for me, this whole this part of the story is just meeting the main character and who we're going to follow the whole way through and giving us a background into the world. That's basically all I got for the first part. So we'll move on to the second part, which is called Red Letter Eclipse. We find out that he's not necessarily known as Riley. There's kind of suspicion placed about it. And Lily seems to know him, though. The eclipse is aligned with Mars, which is why I believe it's called Red Letter Eclipse. And they talk about the Sullivan's consequence, which is, I like the fact that they kind of given it a name, and it's not just, the
Sullivan Act.
Yeah, exactly. And they talk about it like it's a fixed point in time, to quote Doctor Who, because, it's one of those things that you can't go back and change.
Unless you're Hiro Nakamura.
Exactly. We find out that there's people on the outside called Purgers, and they're killing specials. To me, that made it feel like kind of Friends of Humanity kind of thing, but that changes as we go through. Sylar is still seen as a killer. even though there's rumors that he was redeemed, but he should still have to pay for what he's done. Frank does an almost word for word speech of the Mohinder, where does it come from, as the eclipse happens. And Riley blacks out during the eclipse, and he wakes up, and everyone around him is dead. He's Yep, his eyes went orange and he killed everyone. And it kind of like his powers manifested during the eclipse. And it kind of sends a note to the Purgers, and the Purgers make their way over. Lily and Riley are captured along with a new friend called Owen. Owen's powers are to kind of see the future of people, and he doesn't see any good in Riley's. People don't trust Owen because of his power of, knowing them, and he doesn't kind of trust himself. And we start with the Hope Never Dies, which seems to be the kind of save the cheerleader, save the world, at least for the beginning half of the book. We find out that there's a machine which is being used to clone people using. It's very Renatus kind of, in the fact that they're monetizing is what they called it, right? They were monetizing the Evos to kind of save the world. And the Purgers aren't called the Purgers to themselves. They're called the Preservers, and they're funded by the Preservation of Eden, which is a kind of eco-friendly company. In italics, company. Riley is cloned. The Purgers arrive to try and get him to use his powers. It works, and he kills them. And it seems that Riley himself has kind of two personalities. And this kind of feels like we're meeting an antagonist, but we're just getting a little bit of the background into the antagonist. So yeah. Next up, we have Cardinal Tragedy. Riley is joined by Owen and the two people who are inside the cloning machine called Dylan and Quentin.
Funny.
Yeah, I know, right? Dylan's power is cloning. Quentin's power is the ability to give or take life, and they kind of expand on that a bit later. We find out the Preservers have moles at every manor, and they only take interesting specials. And we find out that Riley's actual name is Noah Gray, and obviously that has a lot of significance. His powers are a bit all over the place, are Riley's / Noah's, because he's able to switch Owen's powers from being able to see the future and the past of someone into teleportation. And we meet Hope. And yeah, it's just learning more of Riley's backstory. Next up, we get on to Hope Never Dies, meeting the Great Hope. So Dylan, Quentin, Hope, and there's these two twins called the JJ twins. They all used to work together, and we find out that the JJ twins see the future, which is a good idea, especially since, we've just given Owen the power of teleportation. Hope is able to absorb energy, and we find out that the Godsend device is a kind of AI which grants powers. Riley is able to...
This sounds really familiar, man.
It's very Fringe-like, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, Riley is able to communicate with Noah, and Noah believes everyone is evil. And this is the only way that I can kind of explain this is like future Pete was able to push present Peter into Jesse. That's kind of like it was, but they kind of share the same conscious. Like if you watch Fringe, it's kind of like the first couple of episodes of Fringe where Denham is
spoiler alert. No, for people, a lot of people haven't seen Fringe.
Really? You should watch Fringe. It's bloody good. Anyway, and then we find out the big bad is someone called the Nomad, and he has the power to reflect powers, which kind of helps him because people try and kill him, and it kind of happens to them. We have some missiles which are activated, and Owen, Hope, and Riley go to evacuate a town. Dylan and Quentin trying to stop the missiles whilst, still in this kind of prison that they were kept in. Noah doesn't trust Hope. Noah absorbs Hope and injures Owen, which kind of means that he has 3 people on him now. And we meet a character called Hisoka, who kind of works for the Nomad, but kind of under duress because his wife's been captured. And he talks about there being a chain reaction and dominoes are falling. We find out that the clone of Riley they call him Wildcard, and he's the absolute worst version of Noah. He's like the evil Noah, basically.
So I just pictured him with a goatee.
Exactly. And Hisoka feels very much like a Miyagi kind of character in the way that he kind of talks. And this basically gives us background to Noah, the Nomad, and the overall plan of what the Nomad is doing. Next up, we have the devastation of Eden. Eden is destroyed, obviously. Duh. Noah is able to hold more than one conscious, but it kind of weakens the other. So he has Hope and Riley in him. sounds really weird. He has Hope and Riley in him, but Riley is fading because obviously Hope is the newer one as she kind of takes over a bit more. And we find out that the Nomad has kind of chips in people, so he can kind of track them. And that one of the missiles is left. They've stopped all the missiles, and there's only one left, and it's heading for Wildcard. We find out that Riley and Noah are quote unquote brothers. Riley is the good, which kind of helps Noah, and his memories are starting to come back from being before his quote unquote memory wipe. But his memory wipe is only kind of Riley and him joining for the first time.
No, wait. Where is Noah Gray? I was just like, oh my God, that just reminded me of you. Remember that question we had?
Yes. The next one we have is called Filicide. Is that how you pronounce it? Filicide. Anyway, we find out that Noah is from an alternative universe, and basically the Nomad hides him underground and makes him scared of the world so he won't be contaminated. Lily learns of the future thanks to the JJ twins. This is all in the past. This is like their June 13th. Noah finds out that he's not from this time. Nomad puts Riley and Noah together. It represses Noah's powers and reignite during an eclipse. It basically is giving us background to the Nomad, his family, Lily, Noah, and Riley. Next up, we have the Impossible Sun, which basically there's a massive explosion and Riley is dead, as in the consciousness of Riley is dead within Noah. And HRG arrives, and we find out that the consciences have merged, kind of like Cy Parkman. Noah's powers are based on emotion, whereas Wildcard's isn't. Hero joins them in, and we find out that Hero's sword can kind of help, or at least it will make Noah believe that he can channel his power now that Riley isn't around. It's kind of like Noah's Dumbo feather in season 1. There's only a couple of Petrelli Manors left. The rest have kind of been taken over by these Nomad kind of spies, and so they go down to kind of find out that the Nomad clone they go to try and take down the clone, or at least the spy over at the first Petrelli mansion. So they're sent there, and basically this is just breaking down the future and them kind of coming up with a plan. And it makes sense because HRG, the man with the plan, is there. The next stop is called Just Like Old Times. And this is essentially another kind of flashback episode, which is we have Angela has kind of prophesized this from the beginning, and Noah just didn't listen. And actually, I'm just going to call him Part Bennett. Bennett didn't listen. The plan was for there to be a kind of utopia, but one where kind of the Nomad controls it. And then he kind of gets bored of like this kind of utopia and gets everyone to kind of kill themselves. Nomad is kind of playing God at this point. He's looking for omnipotence. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Anyway, and the power of cloning. It kind of shows the other side of the kind of previous chapters, with Noah finding out what is going on and making his way over to kind of with Bennett finding. Sorry, it's so confusing. With Bennett finding out. This works on this basically is the other side of the previous chapters, but with Bennett finding out what is going on and making his way to Noah. Next up is A Paladin's Absolution, which has the Nomad in Noah's mind and them kind of hashing it out between themselves. Nomad thinks his plan will kind of prevent the future, which is kind of like an evil genius thing to kind of do, isn't it? It's like, well, it's not because of me, it's because, who's to say that I won't stop this future? And Hero comes up with the idea to kind of create a clone of himself so that they can, try and throw the Nomad off. They release Michael, who is the time traveler who was able to get Noah in the first place, and Hisoka's wife. And they confront the Nomad, and we find out that Peter was also in this prophecy, but was killed. So Angela was like, no, I don't want him to be any part of this. Noah, you can handle it yourself. Next up, we have the final chapter, which is called Wanton Warmonger. We start off with a big fight, or a big kind of stalemate between kind of Nomad and Noah, because, neither of them can really hurt each other. Nomad realizes that his plan is kind of backfiring, and now he's trying to stop the world from kind of being destroyed because of his plan. We find out that when he kind of puts Noah in the Godsend machine, it doesn't work because it's specifically tailored to Noah's DNA, but because he has absorbed Riley, his DNA has changed slightly. Nomad is killed by his wife, and Noah basically absorbs everything and quote unquote goes home. So yes, that is the end of that. What did you think of the book?
I thought it was pretty good. I like the original characters. It's just a hard thing to write, canon characters into your story like you were
Definitely.
saying. That was like the only thing. Like I love the original characters. They were great. I love the twist on it. And I love like the whole impossible son thing. I thought that was
I like the story for what it was. Like, I can understand, people wanting to bring in the old characters to kind of close the chapter on them. But, my feelings on Scylla. So yeah,
no my
at
feelings
least
on Fowler.
at least there was like no Claire and no Peter. So I'm fine with that. The thing about the original characters that I had not beef with, but it was just kind of some of the explanation of the powers were a bit too OP. Like Noah Gray, obviously is Sila's son, so he's going to have that kind of overpoweredness as well. But it kind of felt like most of the characters kind of had more than kind of one power that kind of didn't relate. Maybe it's just me
I'll
and my
just tell you my pet peeve. I smell self-insert all over this fanfic, and that
yeah,
is like one of my biggest pet peeves about fanfic.
yeah,
Just don't do it.
yeah, definitely. But yeah, apart from that, I got through the book in a couple of days. It was a decent enough read. It was an easy read. I just wanted to kind of
I wasn't
take my
expecting there to
time
be
with it.
that many chapters. That's why
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, let's do it Saturday. I was like, I'm gonna wake up early and knock these little chapters. And I was like,
Def-
Ricky, we've got to reschedule here.
Apart from that, I'd like to know. Well, we're going to try and grab an interview with the writer. There's a couple of things I want to know. Like, obviously, he's had this idea in the works for a while. Like, I think he's been working on it for a couple of years, and I just want to know how much of Heroes Reborn kind of is influenced in this, because there's quite a few little things. Like, obviously, Noah Gray is kind of like Tommy. He's that kind of amnesiac kind of character until much later on. You've got Quinton and Quentin, obviously. There's a deserted wasteland future, and then obviously they kind of hark back to a couple of things, like the machine, or the Godsend machine, it's fairly reminiscent of Fringe, and the fact that Nomad isn't really given a name till the very end is very reminiscent of HRG in season 1. So those are the only kind of things that I could kind of pick out from the story. But other than that,
Those are all kind of classic tropes that a lot
yeah,
of stories do. So
yeah, I'm just reaching with the Quinton and Quentin. But yeah, I believe he's going to be doing a couple more like chapters, and I'm kind of interested to see where it goes. I'd like to know what happens, and I kind of, it feels like the other side. Like, we have to find out more about this alternate universe, I think, and I would just like there to be a bit more original characters and not kind of relying on the old characters. But we'll see. Cool.
makes me want to write fanfic, but I just ain't got the time.
We should write fanfic. We should do collabs. Or I'll just come up with the ideas and you write, because I'm awful at writing.
Yeah, I can pound out the dialogue.
Exactly. We'll just do dialogue back and forth.
Google Docs.
Yes. Cool. So, I think that's it for now.
Oh, great. Now we're going to have a ton of emails. Where's that fanfic, really, Ricky?
It's going to happen. It's just going to be just like waiting for Heroes and Heroes Reborn. It's going to be a couple of years. So, yeah. 5 years worth of writing.
Well, all right, that'll do it. All right, we want to thank you for joining us on this episode of the Permatech Files. We hope you enjoyed it. We want to encourage you guys to read this book and send in your thoughts. Hopefully, we can nab an interview with him. And as always, extra information is in the show notes. Great.
And download the podcast Save the World.